Hey, welcome back. It is a new week and we're getting ready to add to the chaos in this 57 build by more parts laying around everywhere. So the plan is we're going to start on a, if it's not broke, don't fix it, rebuild on this engine and transmission. For those that don't know, we were able to get this thing running and driving as it sets after being parked up for about 40 years. This thing started up and actually sounded really healthy, didn't really smoke, and there wasn't a whole lot of top end noise. The oil was relatively clean. Went through and did a compression test. Everything checked out actually really decent, except for one plug or one cylinder was down a few pounds. So hopefully that's something maybe sticky ring related, a little crusty on the valve or something. But we'll get this thing taken apart and do a kind of a visual inspection and see if we can't help that guy along. Other than that, this thing leaks fluids on every orifice that it's got. So we're going to again, get this thing disassembled, reseal it, hopefully throw basic parts at it, freshen it up with some paint, and drop it back in the car. Now, I do know it needs a fuel pump. We'll probably go ahead and throw a water pump on while it's at it. And then we'll also take a peek at the timing gear. I believe those are nylon, that are typically problematic or prone to coming apart once it's disassembled. So anything that's going to be kind of a consumable or something that needs to be addressed while it's apart, we'll go ahead and take care of that. But other than that, we're going to hit this thing with a pressure washer quick, start on it, see what we can get this thing looking like here in a few minutes. Okay, so I think the thing to do is I'm going to start a little bit of disassembly before I carry this guy outside, hit it with a power washer. Probably go ahead and pull the starter, maybe pull the distributor, yank this generator and carburetor off. And I will for sure go ahead and separate this engine and transmission. This thing is kind of hard to navigate on this one single little cart. And it'll make it a little bit easier to get this thing kind of carried outside so we can hit it with some degreaser and an oven cleaner to kind of get this thing freshened up. Now I have went ahead and purchased a seal kit for this thing. So I will, I'll see what all that includes, and that'll kind of tell me how far I'm going to tear this thing down. I believe it's just going to be kind of the basic. I think it's the kit that just for a basic engine rebuild. So we'll do a quick visual inspection on everything before we start putting everything back together. But this should be pretty quick and relatively straightforward. Like I said, not a whole lot of stuff we're going to replace. We probably will go ahead and look at the clutch while this thing's out. If it needs one, we'll go ahead and stick one in. That's be a no-brainer to go ahead and take care of that. And then I guess I need to investigate these transmission mounts. I have not ordered those yet. I do have the front engine mounts ready, so I'll have to add those to that, add that to the list. I don't think I have a water pump, so I'll have to check that. But other than that, just a little bit of house cleaning here, and then we'll get this thing outside and start hitting it with some water. Okay, so we got this thing halfway washed down, hit it with some oven cleaner a couple times. Probably gonna have to do a little more scraping when we get some parts pulled off of it, but it's pretty clean for the most part. A little bit of crud back here behind the intake and exhaust. It's just kind of hard to get to, but we'll try to get it a little bit better before we start throwing paint on this thing. Probably have to wire brush some of this stuff, but it's way better than it was. We can start disassembling now. So I think we're gonna start with, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the carburetor, distributor, all this stuff, yank the fuel pump off of it, probably go ahead and pull a water pump, timing cover. I think I'll probably go ahead and take the intake and the exhaust manifolds, pop those guys loose. At some point I'll pull the valve cover. So really anything that's going to have a serviceable gasket. I don't know if I'm going to pull the head or not yet. I guess I might. We'll see where we're going to end up. We'll see where we end up here in a little bit, but for now we're just going to start a little bit more disassembly. Alrighty, so this thing's coming along halfway decent. No broken fasteners yet, so that means all the rest of them are going to break. Working on the timing cover here. Got two fasteners that are coming in from the inside of the oil pan, so I'm going to have to pick this thing up, drop the pan, and then we'll be able to pop this timing cover off. was wanting to get this thing stripped down about as far as we could go prior to dragging all this garbage out and getting to the hoist over here. So that's going to take a couple minutes to get all the parts and all these body panels and whatnot drug out of the way. All right, so I got this guy picked up, dropped the oil pan quick, yanked the timing cover off. So if this in fact came with a nylon or a fiber timing gear, which it's my understanding they did, this thing has already been changed out. So I've got an aluminum gear here and a steel one here. These things mesh up nice and there's no visible wear anywhere. So I think we're good to go with that. So that'll help us out, save a couple bucks. And then up under here, the crank and whatnot, all this is nice and clean. There's not a whole lot of crud or anything caked on everywhere. Same thing with the bottom of the oil pan. So I think just from this and a couple other things looking like this thing has been or might have been rebuilt at some point. I know there was some notes on the pillar of the car up here that mentioned an overhaul at some point. So I don't know, you know, obviously what that entailed, but maybe we'll see some markings when pop the valve cover off, and maybe we'll pull the head and kind of go from there. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to kind of clean all this mess up. I'm going to lower this guy back down, set it on my stand here, and then since all this is kind of exposed a little bit better, take it back outside. I'm going to power wash a little more, try to clean it up a little bit, and then I think we'll start popping stuff off the top end here, and we can kind of go from there. So I went ahead and pulled this valve cover quick just to do a visual inspection up top here to see kind of what's going on. And it's not real sludged up or anything. It's actually pretty clean. I cannot remember, I'll have to look back at my notes, but one of these holes here is a little bit low on compression. And by low, it's, you know, like 10 pounds or so lower than the rest of them, if I remember correctly. But my gasket set does have a head gasket in it, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this head off quick, and then we'll hopefully see what might be the issue behind that guy is. So I'm kind of hoping maybe that valve might be a little bit crusty or something, or maybe a stuck ring that'll come around, but we'll see. So I'm gonna pop this head off quick. I'm gonna bust these things loose by hand, then I'll put an impact on them and pull them out the rest of the way. So we'll get this thing cracked open here in a second, kind of see what's going on. Maybe I'll see some stampings to see if this thing has been rebuilt in the past, if this thing's been oversized or not. Hadn't seen anything yet to definitively say one way or the other. I kind of feel like it probably has, but nothing for sure. All right, so I got the head off. A little bit of crud, but nothing too bad. I think a lot of this junk and stuff I've kind of knocked loose from power washing this thing. So I'll get a shot back in here and kind of clean some of this stuff up best we can, because I am not planning on pulling the pistons or anything out of the rotating assembly. But a little bit of wear to it. I mean, nothing too bad. There is some wear lines and whatnot on these cylinder walls. Nothing, no gouging or anything, and there is a little bit of a ring ridge, but I don't know. I think it'll be just fine, because like I said, the compression pretty well checked out overall. Everything's nice and tight, so don't think this thing's got a lot of wear on it. There is some carbon buildup and just crud on these intake and exhaust valves, so I think I will pull the valves, get these things. I've got some lapping compound. Maybe just kind of clean these things up. May just take a wire brush to them, but that's what I'm going to start with. And you can actually halfway see there is a little bit of water coming through on these valves, so you can tell that they're not seating 100%. So I don't know, maybe some heat cycles this thing running would kind of clean it up, but we've got it out, so I might as well pop these things loose quick and like I said, just clean them up best we can by hand. We'll get in with a wire brush and kind of knock some of this crud and carbon junk out. Spend a little bit of time on this thing, get it cleaned up best we can. And there's a little bit of crud built up on some of these little water jackets and whatnot, so we'll get the shot back in here and get this thing cleaned up as well. Probably take it outside the power washer and try to blow this thing out best we can. And then we'll take all this good stuff here loose, label everything, and see what we do to get it all put back together without any extra parts. So I got this head stripped. Didn't look too bad. All the intakes are actually really nice. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're sealing, but they visually they all look fine. The exhausts are all a little bit cruddy, but nothing as bad as this number one. This is hands down the worst. So I don't know. I think it's still gonna be fine. We'll just get in here, clean this stuff up. Take a wire brush in here and try to knock some of this junk down. I think it'll be just fine. Block here and all this rotating assembly stuff is gonna be pretty well as it sits, minus a little bit of cleanup. I think all these push rods are just fine. Nothing to these lifters, just a solid lifter, so no maintenance or anything there. We'll just take this stuff halfway apart and kind of clean it. I think I will pull a handful of these out and just kind of peek down in there where they're riding on the camshaft just to visually see kind of what's going on there. But short of that, this thing is nice and tight. Everything rotates smooth. I can spin it by hand, so I think we'll be just fine to get this thing cleaned up. And there's not going to throw any unnecessary parts at it that we don't need to, so we'll just spend a little bit of time cleaning and hit this thing with some paint, and back in she'll go. We're just going to start with a couple little brushes here. I'm going to stick these on the end of a drill. We'll get down here around these valve seats and whatnot and see if we can kind of halfway clean some of this up, knock some of this carbon junk off. I wish I had a little small cut brush to get in here, but the ones I have are a little bit too big to kind of fit in here, so I'll see if I can make do with these guys. So I'm not going for new. We're just going to try to get better than what we've got. So we'll just spend a little time here and see how this turns out. Alright, so we got all our valves cleaned up. Just used the wire wheel on the bench grinder here. They polished up real nice. So what we've got going now is I've got all my intake valves dropped into the head here. I do not have any valve springs or anything on. So what we're doing is we're just going to let these things sit with water on top of them. And we'll keep an eye on the intake ports here to be sure there's no water dribbling out. And that'll kind of let us know if these things are going to leak down or not. So we'll watch these things for a little bit. If they check out fine, then we'll pick this thing up and we'll do the exhaust ports or exhaust valves. So the head's going to have to be tipped up a little bit more, otherwise water just dribbles out of the spark plug hole. You can see here is about as deep as I can go. So let these things hang tight for a little bit, then we'll check the exhaust. Fingers crossed all those check out. And then we'll start slamming gaskets in and see if we can get this thing bolted back down here in a couple minutes. I think other than that, we're good to go. Everything's cleaned up. I've peeked at all the, pulled all the lifters out, pulled all the rods, just kind of wiped everything down quick. Everything looks just fine. So hopefully here in a little bit, we'll start getting this thing kind of halfway put back together. Alrighty, so we painstakingly got all the valve springs put back on. No tools, so that took a little while. Got new valve seals while we're at it. The old ones were dry and brittle. The kit came with one, so we stuck those on. So head's cleaned up, block is cleaned up, so I think we're ready to slam this head gasket on. Got the push rods pulled out here, so what I think I'm going to do is we'll drop the head in, torque it, and then we'll worry about the whole rocker assembly and all that after the fact. That thing needs a little bit of attention. It's kind of boogered up with some crud in a couple spots. So we'll halfway take that thing apart a little bit, clean it up, and then we'll put it back on, get it all torqued down, but get this head slammed on first, quick. All right, we're gonna torque this to 95 pounds. Nothing special about the torque sequence other than just the usual start in the center and work your way out. Okay, so I got the rough armor assembly put back together. This thing's way smoother than it was initially, so I think we'll be a-okay. So we'll drop all this hardware in. These little standoffs just torque down to 25 pounds. Little oil feed tube glides up. And then we'll see what we need to do to get these things adjusted. I don't know if they're gonna need to be adjusted in terms of valve last or any of that, but we will figure that out here in a moment. Okay, so I got a little bit of paint on this thing. Not sure what I think about it. You're either gonna love it or hate it. I went with the factory color this thing was supposed to come with, and it seemed like there were some mixed reviews on what color these things came with based on the year. I think the 55s came with a particular color, maybe 55 6s were one color, 7s were a different color, or so on and so forth. And there were super mixed reviews on what people do when they put these things back in to try to stay halfway original. So I went with the original color that I could find, as well as some remnants of old paint that I found kind of buried under some crud on this thing. So here's what we got. It is blue. And it is blue. So obviously transmission, bell housing and whatnot are black, but this thing is stark blue. And we'll see what it looks like crammed into there. It is definitely going to be loud and proud and in your face. There's no question about that. I think probably some of the black accessories, the pulleys and whatnot up front will kind of break it up, hopefully. And I also went ahead and painted white underneath this, under the script here. Did a couple coats of white paint. So what I'm hoping to do is let this get good and hard, and then I'll go back with a hard sanding block and scuff this blue off to cut down into the white. So this Chevrolet is going to be a nice white script. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And then maybe paint the little air breather white to kind of tie into this. So I hadn't painted it yet. We'll see what I decide there. And one thing I did find after cleaning up some more is got a little pinhole here. So I'll have to pop that freeze plug out. If I'm gonna do that one, I might as well do that one as well. So I'll have to add that to the list. But this thing's gonna sit for a little while, let this paint dry, and then we'll cart it back inside. But in the meantime, I think we're gonna get in here and kind of start picking away at some of this other odds and ends stuff that needs to be cleaned up. So here's the air breather. This may be look better white, I don't know, or maybe maybe paint the lettering, the oil lettering white and the rest of the cap blue, something, I don't know. We'll play with it a little bit, go from there. But these things will get painted black, I believe. Got a couple broken bolts here on this, this is the intake manifold here. So those have been soaking. I'm gonna try to weld some nuts on these things, or try some ease outs or whatever. So we'll see what that looks like. But a little bit picking away yet. Get a bunch of this other stuff kind of cleaned up. Gonna keep the same clutch that's in it. This pilot bearing, or this, not pilot bearing, but this clutch release bearing, throwout bearing is pretty rough, so I ordered a new one of those. However, the clutch itself looks like it's fine. It's not brand new by any means, but like there's plenty of material left on it. Everything's nice and smooth, so we'll stick it back in. This thing's actually really easy to get out, so if we get in this thing and kind of don't like it, we can pretty quick to go ahead to pull drive shaft, drop this little transmission, and then we can get into the bell housing, get this slid back, and get the put a clutch in it, not that big of a deal. So we're gonna pick away at some other stuff and kind of see where we're getting here in a little while. Okay, so it's been a day or so. Was able to get some of these miscellaneous parts painted. Went ahead and hit these guys with some it's supposed to be 2000 degree Rust-Oleum ceramic coat paint. A little bit different than what I've used in the past, so we'll see how well it holds up. Kind of goes on in more of like a powdery paste versus just the regular spray paint, but it's not supposed to peel or flake or anything in these higher temperature conditions, so we'll see how well it holds up in time. This is just generic spray paint. Hit the oil pan with that same ceramic coat stuff since it's going to get a little bit warmer. And then just generic paint on the transmission. Was able to get it mounted back up. Went in through new transmission mounts on. Jammed a new tail shaft seal in here just to be sure that's not going to leak. So this guy is pretty well ready for some more assembly. I think before we go any farther, I'm kind of anxious to see how this strip lettering comes out. I went ahead and painted the oil breather white. Probably going to change it to blue because I feel like after you fill this thing up once or twice, it's going to be all dirty and gross. So we'll see. I'll scratch my head on that for a little bit. But for now, I think I'm going to polish away at these little letters here and see what we can get working on that. All right, so my thought here was I painted this white underneath, a couple coats, and then just went over the top of it with the blue. So I'm thinking I'm gonna go through and wet sand this off since it'll be nice and crisp. I got a pretty hard sanding block, so I'm gonna go through and scuff this down and hopefully take the blue off the top, get into the white, and it'll be nice, crisp, sharp lettering. We'll see how it works. Worst case scenario, I can go back and kind of pencil this in from the top, but thought this might be a little bit easier. So we'll try it and see what happens here. Well, that worked out just about perfect. Hadn't decided what I'm gonna do with the breather yet, but this looks really good. I'm happy with that. I think a lot of this black accessory stuff will kind of break this thing up, and this thing will look just fine in there. Anxious to see what it's gonna look like when we get it all jammed back in. So for now, I think I'm gonna work on throwing some of these accessories on. Got to mount these two exhaust and intake manifolds back together. I'm gonna copper coat these gaskets here. Have pretty good luck with that. It's this copper spray. It's like it helps out quite a bit on any of those little imperfections. So we'll clean all that up. Hopefully stick these guys on quick. I still need to do that freeze plug yet. So we're gonna make a parts run, and then we'll go and see about getting some of this other front stuff bolted on, and then probably gonna hang tight on putting the carburetor or anything on yet. But if I can get, if I can kind of get this mess of parts here thrown back on, then we'll be looking pretty good. Alrighty, we are starting again fresh this morning. Put away the camera for a couple days to try to get some stuff knocked out. So this thing needed some rear drum work that we were waiting on some parts for. That stuff finally arrived, so I was able to get that put on. Got the car dropped back down so we could roll it around. Pushed it outside yesterday, kind of power washed the engine bay up here to get it cleaned up a little bit. In preps for engine transmission getting dropped in, so we're looking pretty good there. Still need to tie up my brake lines here. Had a couple little drips on this guy in a couple spots, so went through and I think we've got all that tidied up for the time being, but we'll keep our eye on it to be sure we don't have any wet spots anywhere. And then jumped ahead, got a little more assembly done on this guy, so it's looking pretty good. I think I'm happy with it overall. Decided to go back with a blue oil breather. But front accessories are on. Swapped out our old old generator for a little bit more modern alternator here. So this thing should allow us to eliminate the external voltage regulator, a couple other things. So we'll see what we need to do to pigtail that into the existing wiring harness. Got a rope on here kind of for a belt alignment thing to see if we need to shim this thing around, but I think we're pretty close to where we need to be. Was able to utilize the old generator bracket, a little bit of modification. So this thing is just jam nutted in place so we can shim it either direction if we need to, but I think we're pretty close there. So we'll see how that's going to work out. I think it'll be just fine. Got the both manifolds on, exhaust and intake. Freeze plugs are in, so that's pretty well knocked out. Went ahead and stabbed the distributor back in. All new plugs, plug wires, coil checked out good, so we're going to leave it. So other than that, I think this thing is pretty close to being ready to stab back in. Once we get this thing picked up in the air, we'll get in here and stick the oil pan back on. Same thing with a little inspection cover for the transmission with bell housing. Carburetor, I think we've got parts coming for it. Somehow ordered up with a Carter rebuild kit. And in fact, this is a Rochester, so got that on its way. So other than that, that's pretty well taken care of us for what we've got going here. We got a stack of parts that arrived the other day. Got windshield here, carpet, window felt. There's some weather stripping laying around here somewhere. All new door glass. A couple panes were cracked, so we're just going to replace it all. Got some more stuff laying around in here. We're going to do hush mat stuff underneath the carpet. Couldn't even tell you what's in that box. There's a couple of little goodies hiding around here. So we're going to step back for a second. I need to really clean up this place so we can start getting this stuff all put back together. Once we get this engine and transmission put back in, then we should be able to start stabbing these other front body panels on. That'll open us up quite a bit of room in here. We can actually get in here and lay out the rest of these parts, start getting all the rest of this thing assembled. And then we can halfway start thinking about what we're going to do for interior. So I think for today, that's pretty well going to wrap us up for this episode. Got a little house cleaning we're going to do, so we'll knock that out. Stay tuned for future updates. Thanks for watching.